Okay, so I'm gonna clean up. This is a print that I did not too long ago, but unfortunately I was doing some work on some sheetrock and I got some dust in the ink. So typically I would scrape the ink and I would save the ink, but today I'm not gonna do that. So I'm just gonna throw the ink away. Clearly you don't want to do that every single time. But so I've got a little bit of ink here. I'm going to just clean the ink away. I'm going to show you what it looks like to clean up the screen and then we'll reclaim it. Basically the tools I use is this cake spatula. This is a wonderful tool. And here's my squeegee. I'm just going to use paper towels and then I will show you in a minute. This is my press wash. This is wonderful for getting rid of, it just takes the ink right off. So we'll do that. I'll show you what that looks like and I'll show you how quick and easy it is. This is not my favorite job, I gotta be honest. I hate this job. This is my least favorite thing in screen printing, but you gotta do what you gotta do. So here we go. All right, so I used about 4 paper towels and my hand to get off as much of the ink as possible. This old wooden squeegee is, you know, it's had a lot of use. I don't worry about it too much, but one thing that you do want to do is you want to make sure that you scrape out this little place where the ink can get. There's not much on this side, but on this side, and I'll show you why, or I'll show you how I do that. But the reason why we would do that is because tomorrow when you're printing something in blue, you don't want a little bit of this black ink to get into your blue ink. So I try to get this crevice out as well as possible, and that takes a little bit of time. It's a little bit difficult. I will use a little bit of press wash on this, but with just some paper towels, just about 4 paper towels, I got this thing nice and cleaned off, and then I'll take that out of here. Okay, so I'm just gonna run my spatula right here. And I'm just gonna get all of this black ink out of there. And you can see there's not a ton of black ink in there, but you wanna get that black ink out of there as much as possible. I just run this down a couple times, try to pick that ink out of there, just to get as much of that off as possible. I'm not gonna get all this black off of my spatula. I'm just gonna get it out of the crevice so that the next time I use some ink, it won't contaminate my next batch of ink. One thing you might notice when I'm reclaiming this screen, terrible practice, don't do this, but I didn't actually tape my corners. I did this job in an hour and a half. I just whipped through this job from burning the screen to printing it, drying it, the whole thing in about 45 minutes plus whatever time it took to print, so like an hour and a half total to do this whole job. It was only 3 shirts, so I didn't even tape this. I was just in a serious time crunch. So you'll notice there's no tape. I would never recommend doing that, but so there's no tape to clean off. I'll show you that in another video. I'll show you the taping process. Taping is really, really important, but I didn't do it just because I was in such a hurry. So I'm gonna just clean this screen off. I'm gonna just scrape all this ink. Again, if I hadn't contaminated it with the sheetrock dust, I would just scrape this right back into the, bucket. But it has a little bit of dust in it, so I definitely don't want to reuse this. So I'm gonna start from scratch and just throw this away. So I'm just gonna go with my cake froster. Get as much of the ink off of the screen as possible. The nicest thing about this cake froster is that you can just wipe the ink right off. It just comes right off. It's stainless steel. It's nice and easy. Okay, so I've gotten most of the ink off of the screen. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a little bit of press wash on there, use my paper towels, and I'm just gonna clean it right up. This screen is never gonna be, or this image is never gonna be used again, so I'm gonna reclaim this. So I'm not trying to do a perfect job on this. I'm just trying to get as much of the ink off as possible so I don't have that going into my filtration system, and it makes it really hard to reclaim. So I'm gonna get as much ink off as possible. I'm gonna use a little bit of press wash, and like I said, I'm just gonna use a couple paper towels and we'll go from there. There's a little spot of ink here that I'm gonna does it hurt to go over one more time? clean spatula. All right. Couple sprays of the press wash. And now I'm just going to take, I usually take 2 just to make sure that I have a little absorption. And I'm just getting as much ink off as possible. And with the press wash, the ink really comes up really easily. So for reclaiming a screen, this is perfectly fine. I've got all the ink off of it that I want to get off of it. I am going to show you, so on the back side of this, where I tape the registration marks, I'm going to go ahead and pull that tape off. You don't want to get the tape wet before you start reclaiming it. You want to get the tape off of there, and then I'll give just one little wipe on the back side of this, because you don't want, like I said, you just want to get as much of the ink off as possible. You don't want to be battling the ink in the washout booth. You just want that job to be, it's painful enough when you do it exactly right. You don't want to make it any harder on yourself than you have to. Sometimes when I'm doing the back side, I'll just flip the screen over. There's not enough ink in there to fall out onto your floor or anything like that if you did it right. So I just pull the tape off of here. I want to get as much of the, well, I want to get all of the tape off so that I'm not getting it wet in the washout booth and making it difficult to clean. Depending on how long your tape's been on there, sometimes it'll come right off and sometimes it'll be a little bit sticky. So this screen, I'd say, has been sitting here for about a week and a half. So it's a little bit sticky, and it's been hot and humid, so. I said earlier I did this job in a rush, so I didn't really take a lot of time taping it. Usually I don't use quite this much tape. Everything that you can save, you save a little bit save a penny here and a penny there, that goes in your pocket. So good idea to save as much as you can. All right, so we've got the ink off of here. Again, I'm just going to give it one more on the back side. I'm just going to give it a little wipe, get that last little bit of ink off of there. Boom. And then we'll zip on over to the washout booth and we'll go from there. Okay, so a couple things to start off with. So number one is the chemicals that I use. If you've seen my filtration system, you know that I don't just flush this down into the sewer system. I live on a septic system and I definitely don't want this stuff in my groundwater. So I have a whole process for that. It's on my filtration screen or filtration video. If you want to check that out, that would be great. If that'll be helpful to you. So this, I do use the pressure washer for this. This screen is yellow. Most beginners are not going to use a yellow screen. You're probably going to use a white screen. So it looks a little bit different than it would. This emulsion is actually thicker than it looks. I know it looks very thin. It kind of looks like there's not much on there. But I'm going to wash this off and I'm going to just reclaim the whole thing start to finish. The chemicals that I use, I just showed you, I told you I was going to show you the press wash. So this is the press wash that I use. And again, it'll be a link in the description. So this is the press wash that I use to get most of the ink off. The emulsion remover that I use, Ecotex is just something that's readily available on Amazon. So I use a lot of their products. And then the Hyper Haze remover. I'm not sure if I'm going to need to use this, but basically what I use this for is it degreases and it also takes some of the ink off. If you've done a lot of printing and you've left your ink on here, it'll leave that image in the screen. And most people, doesn't affect your print one bit, but most people don't like it. So I'll show you hopefully that there'll be a little bit of a residue and then I'll be able to use the dehazer and show you how that works. Okay, so first I just start off, just try to squirt off as much as possible. All right, so I used my pressure washer. I got as much of the ink off as possible. Now, and most importantly, I got the screen wet, so now I'm gonna just use some emulsion remover. And basically, I just use a few squirts on each side. You really don't wanna overdo it with this. But the most important thing at this stage is you don't wanna let the emulsion remover dry in your screen. I've never actually had that happen, but I've read a lot of horror stories about leaving your emulsion remover in your screens. If it dries, apparently it will never come out. So make sure that you don't do that. So I just have my emulsion remover on there. I'm gonna use my brush just to start loosening things up on both sides. And I'm just gonna let it sit for, not long, I'm gonna let it sit for 30 seconds or so, just to loosen up the emulsion as much as possible. If you do this right, the emulsion will come straight right out, nice and easy, and it'll look nice right off the bat. So you won't, not too much elbow grease in this if you do it right. All right, so I'm gonna be honest with you guys. It's usually not always that easy. It's not always that easy. Sometimes it takes just a little bit of elbow grease, but the emulsion came right out of this. The screen is clean. Really important, even though your hands might be clean, mine are not, but even though your hands might be clean, you do not want to be touching the screen a lot. That's how grease gets on there. That's how your oils from your skin get on the screen, and it really makes it difficult to keep your screen, to recoat your screen. So you want to make sure that you're degreasing your screens, but help yourself out. Don't touch the screens. I know a lot of people don't even degrease their screens because they're just very careful about not touching the screen. So I try not to ever touch my screens with my hands. I try to make sure that they're always in a box, make sure that they're always clean. So, so the emulsion's out of the screen. I'm not sure if you can see it. I can't see it too well on the camera. It's just a little tiny, you can see the image a little bit there. So you can still see the image. Basically that's just the silk has been stained by the ink that you used. So just for kicks, I'm going to use my degreaser and dehazer. I don't do this typically because I don't really care. This little bit of ink doesn't affect your next print one bit. Ink will go right through the next print. It's not going to affect it at all, but I'm going to do it just because I know some people don't care for having the ink on their screen. So I'm going to do the dehazing and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I just take my brush, I just get a little dehazer on there, not a whole lot, and then I just put a nice little coat of dehazer on the ink. I do that on both sides. Again, I don't use a whole lot. I just give it a nice little scrub. And now I'm just gonna let the dehazer sit for a little bit. Depending on how bad the stain is, how dark it is. Again, this stain was not dark at all. It's very easy to come out. But sometimes you wanna leave your dehazer on there for a few minutes, up to 10 minutes. It'll help the ink come out of your screen. This one I'm gonna leave for just a couple of minutes because it's not very dark, and give it another once over with the brush, and then I'm going to use my pressure washer. Okay, so now that I've just pressure washed it and dehazed it, if you look at this screen, it is perfect. There's no ink in the screen at all. You cannot see the previous image in there at all. And the nice thing about this dehazer is it's also a degreaser, so I don't have to degrease this afterwards. If I was not dehazing it, I would just use my degreaser. And again, I'll link that in the description. So this screen is ready to go back in the box. It does have a little bit of old emulsion up here, but nothing that I'm too concerned about. So I'm gonna wash that out really quick and then I'll throw it in the box and get it dry. And now straight into the drying box so that this thing will be ready to go in about an hour for my next image. I'm actually going to show you the reclaim process on a white screen. It's just a little easier to see the emulsion when you are using a white screen than on a yellow screen. So I'm going to reclaim this and I'll show you what that looks like. So one of the things I said earlier was that putting the emulsion remover on there will loosen up the emulsion, and you don't want as much ink. You can see I have a little bit of ink, which is going to make a mess, and it's just going to make it just a little more difficult to clean the screen, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm going to let this thing sit for a minute and then we'll hose her up. Okay, there we go. So we've got our screen all emulsion free. I'm gonna try to zoom in on this to see if, I don't know if you can see this spot right here. There's a little spot where it looks like there's a little bit of emulsion in there, and I want to be honest with you. Sometimes screens get holes in them, and this screen had a little hole in it. So what I did is I took a little super glue, and I just put some super glue on that spot so that the screen won't rip. Eventually it's going to give way, but right now the super glue is holding it. It's outside of my image area, so because it's way over here on the, if I had a hole in the middle, I would just remesh this screen. But because the hole's over here in the corner, I'm not going to remesh this thing because it's never going to be in the way. I'm never going to have an image that's this wide. So I have my image area. I've got this little area over there that I have a hole in, and that just happens from time to time. I'm pretty clumsy. I drop things once in a while, and you get holes in your screen. So I got a little hole in my screen. It's got, it's way over there on the edge, as you can see. So it's never going to affect my image. And basically, I've just put some super glue on it to try to keep it from ripping or becoming a bigger hole. So hasn't affected my screen tension at all. So I'm just going to leave it be. Okay, so because I don't really care about this little ghost image, I'm just going to use my degreaser. Okay, so my degreaser, I'm just going to put a little bit of degreaser on here. Not a whole lot of degreaser on it. Put a little degreaser on here. Oh, this stuff smells terrible. I would definitely recommend wearing a mask. So I just put a little degreaser on here. I have a second screen. This is a second brush that I use for degreasing my screen, because you don't want to get a lot of ink back on your screen. So this is the brush that I was using with my ink. This is the one that I'm going to use for degreasing my screen. So just going to degrease it. And again, this just takes the oils, anything that's going to keep your emulsion from sticking to your screen. So just a quick once over with the degreaser, and then I'm going to rinse it. And now it's been reclaimed, it's been degreased, and it is ready to go back into production. So I'll let this thing dry off, about an hour at the minimum, and then we'll put emulsion on it and it'll be good to go. So hopefully this helped you out a little bit. Have a great day and happy printing.